Back in June, May, June of 2009, I'm always keeping my finger on the pulse of the global jihad, and I was taken aback by these protests in the UK against British returning soldiers. British returning soldiers who were being taunted and the name-calling baby killer, you know, the really atrocious, fresh from the fields of Iraq and Afghanistan. And there was a group that sprang from those egregious events, which is what we find. From these egregious events, good things come, that I started to follow and support vigorously. And so I was there watching and chronicling this group from the moment that it was born. So I know who they are, and I know what they are. And it was also interesting to watch this campaign because, of course, in the UK it's far more vicious. I mean, we can pat ourselves on the back that it's not that bad here, but we are going there. We're 10 years away from there. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. And so it was wild to watch this vicious campaign of defamation and racism, bigotry, so on and so forth. Fierce. It was fierce. And even here in the States, I am smeared with, oh, you're an EDL supporter, as if it's a bad thing. So I am enormously honored and pleased that their leadership could be here with us today to describe to you what's going on in their country and how they are taking the fight to the streets, and they're taking the fight back to the enemy. And so it is my great honor to introduce to you Tommy Robinson, one of the leaders of the English Defense League.
Before I go into an introduction about our organisation myself, I'd like to say what a pleasure it is to be here today in New York City on this sacred day. I want to thank Pamela and Robert for hospitality, for inviting us and giving us this opportunity, and to share a platform today and a room with such brave people. 11 years ago, I think everyone can remember where they were. It's got the world fell still. I can remember where I was a young lad working at Luton Airport at the time. I remember everything about it. And I just want to say, we felt your pain, we still feel your pain. We formed, as Pamela said, 3 years ago, just over 3 years ago, after soldiers won a homecoming parade for our town. They were met, as Pamela said, with shouts of abuse. One of their mothers was spat at, a local lad had died, another local lad had lost his legs. It wasn't the fact that these Islamists done it, it was the fact that they were facilitated in doing it. They were taken through our local town hall to do it. The police had prior notice that they were going to do it. And when there was a reaction to what they had just done, who was arrested? Members of our community were arrested. They were protected. The police didn't even look at them. And this wasn't the first thing, this was a build-up. This has been going on in my hometown for 15 years. We've watched the whole town decay, and Islamism spread like a wildfire. And it was at this point that we said, something has to be done, something has to change, because what's the next step in this? A soldier's funeral? So we have to defend against it, we have to highlight it. Now, in the beginning, I wore a mask, I covered my face with a balaclava, which probably didn't help our image problem, but I used a false name. I'd done all of this because I knew the consequences of what's going to happen, before standing up and speaking out against it. I knew the threats of violence would come. I knew the violent attacks would come. I knew the attacks against my property would come. I knew Kev's had been go to his house with shotguns. He's had we've had our cars blown up. I knew all of this would come. Now, after 12 months, they exposed me as who I was, which is a blessing in this. Really, I didn't want to be exposed. So, but once they exposed it, I thought, right, the mask's off. I'll say it wherever I need to say it. I'll stand on TV now and say it, and people have followed. So we started opposing extremist Islam. There's an extremist group, Mujahideen, Islam for UK, these groups that are all across the UK that are supporting terrorism, recruiting on the streets of our towns for terrorism. We started opposing them, and from the very start there was the threats of violence. And we had national demonstrations, we were called racists, all these different things. Now, then it comes time, my first Osman warning. An Osman warning, they're not given out lightly. It's an official warning by the British government and the British police. It's a warning against the threat against your life. And my first one was called down to my local police station, and it was detailed. I've got it in black and white, and it says that due to your outspoken opposition to Islam, there are members of the local Berry Park community, which is the Islamic community, which wish to make an attempt on your life. We know these gangs are armed, this is from the police, and dangerous. We cannot protect you 24 hours a day. Our advice to you is to take your family and leave Luton. That's where I've been born and bred. So their advice to me is to leave my hometown. Then they said, we need to see your wife. So you need to see my wife. So then, later in the evening, they come to my house. They sat my wife down, who was pregnant, and they read her the same morning. So I said to the police officer, how long have you been a police officer? 20 years. Have you ever set a pregnant Muslim woman down and told her that Christians are going to murder her? No. Therein lies the problem, and your advice to us is to leave. Now that was my first Osman warning. I've since had 3. I started taking precautions. I started wearing a bulletproof vest. I started being careful about where I was going. And then it dawned on me that if I can't walk down the streets of my hometown, I'm dead anyway. So I took the bulletproof vest off. I've stopped hiding, and if that moment comes, then it'll be my head held high. Because we're not running anymore. Islam rules with fear and intimidation. You show them any weakness, they'll run all over it. And I say at every one of our demonstrations, look around you, look around this room now. I don't see no scared faces. This is not a scared face. We're ready, we're willing to stand up against the fight no matter what it says.